Yes, it looks like Sidney Powell is off the Trump team.
Has Sidney Powell compromised her professional standing on a going forward basis?
Most likely, yes. So Sidney Powell's background is she was a government prosecutor, but not like a trial prosecutor. It's mostly appellate work. Then she left and she cashed in on the Enron cases. That's where she really got well known, and that's where she got well paid. And that's where she started a lot of her work involving Andrew Weissman and that crowd and government misconduct, because there was a lot of it in the Enron prosecutions. And then she was kind of quiet for a while. She'd written a couple of books. The Trump era sort of allowed her a new platform because of, hold on one second.
Yeah. And while I have the super chat up there, Jasper, I have one book in the back. It is Are You My Mom? But I think it's cut out when it's a kid's book. It was up there for like the first 10 streams that Robert and I did, so I just kept it there as a ritual now. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my phone's been usually off, but I've had to turn it on because certain people have been calling and I don't want to miss it. But normally I tend to leave it off because I hate being interrupted. But it always agitates everybody, of course.
Better your phone than the background, whatever music system was playing the last time.
Oh, yes, that in Atlanta. That was crazy. That was wild. So her background was, criminal appeals, got some notoriety in Enron, and then Andrew Weissman's return in the Mueller prosecution or the Mueller investigation gave her a new platform to access the conservative right. And so she's, had her own little, I think it was like a podcast or talk show. I, first ran into her personally at a CPAC convention in Maryland that they hold every winter. It's usually every February, sometimes early March. It's meant to coincide with spring break for some college students. And my impression of her was that, that she knew a lot about criminal discovery cases. That was sort of her area of expertise, had done a good amount of criminal appeals, and would be a good lawyer for Flynn. Because that's what Flynn's case was really all about, was government misconduct. It was about prosecutorial misconduct. It was about discovery evidence being hidden. And that was precisely what she was good at. And I had recommended her to Flynn's World that she would be good at that. She's never been a civil lawyer, to my knowledge. Very few cases she's appeared in. And to give an idea, even in the criminal case context, I've appeared in 10 times more cases than she has since 2000. So, she's not been that active. And there was a psychological profile. Put it this way, she was someone you could see as susceptible to a disinformation campaign. That I always say there's two things that break people. One is stress, and everybody kind of knows that stress can make people fracture. What they under-recognize is how success can make people fracture. And some people are not necessarily perfectly constituted for the limelight. And sometimes the limelight gets a little too bright and a little too attractive. And that's why I like all of the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings movies, because they do a great job of portraying these deep moral narratives about character and how even good people can go AWOL, like Thorin Oakfield and the way he goes. I may have mispronunciated his name, but I'm sure the commenters will let me know. Maybe it's Oakenfield. Maybe that's it. For some reason, I'm blanking on it. But how he goes nuts when he gets back into the castle, in the dwarf castle with the gold. He starts to lose his mind for a period of time. That everybody has a precious that can entrap them into making poor decisions. And there was certain sort of desirability for notoriety and attention that was present all the way back, that was at risk outside of her area of expertise. And about a year ago, some of the people in Flynn World, obviously Lynn Wood, were getting deeply entranced into the precious of the right, which was the QAnon movement. And QAnon is one of the most successful disinformation campaigns ever waged. And I knew a lot of people that were involved in it, a lot of nice people, well-meaning people, well-intended people, but kept pointing out that look at the consequences of getting involved in QAnon. You quit taking action that you were otherwise taking. In other words, it seems to have an effect that's not beneficial to the cause you believe you're ascribing it to. So all of a sudden, it's okay that Julian Assange is being held in prison. Suddenly, it's okay even for a while that Flynn was being prosecuted, because it was all part of the plan.
I think it's the case that she wants to pursue is probably just too big for any kind of deadline, that's for sure. I mean, they can't put that much evidence together. They need They need more. She needs more evidence or something very, very compelling. That's huge. But I believe her. I think she's on to something. Other people think she might just be, delusional.
But here she really hijacked for a brief period of time. She hijacked Trump's legal defense. And it was everybody that was knowledgeable about there were three schools of thought related to Trump's election contest. The GOP establishment, elected officials, a lot of judges. Here's a little side fact for you folks out there. What did the two federal judges who rejected the Trump lawsuits or Trump-related lawsuits have in common? They weren't appointed by the same president. They're both members of the Federalist Society. Just keep that in mind.
I was going to go with appointed by the same president, so I guess not.
That's why one was appointed by Obama, one was appointed by Trump, but they both screwed Trump. And what do they have in common? Federalist Society members. But you had the establishment, a lot of your Federalist Society hierarchy, a lot of your elected officials, a lot of your high-ranking election people, a lot of the Trump campaign people who just wanted Trump to go through the motions, do some recounts, but then concede and go home. Then over on the opposite side, you had a combination of true believers, QAnon folks, critics, grifters, people looking for their last hurrah, trying to make this into Russiagate on steroids. And then in between, you had a group of us, some left, some right, who wanted just to use this as a case example to create election reform in the country. And those of us on the Trump side who believe that the election, an honest vote would show Trump won, wanting to focus on the core factual issues that could prove it. And in the process, make sure we apply our election laws in a way that is open, transparent, and promotes confidence in democracy. And that's where some left allies were allied to that cause. But we were getting killed by the two sides on the opposite side. In 1 minute, it was the establishment sabotaging him. The next minute, it was the crazies pitching conspiracy theories that could never be proven in court and would make everything look laughable to the establishment and completely crush our capacity to have our arguments heard.
And so, actually, let me just say one thing here. How when Robert said that she was involved in Q, he meant espousing or adhering or subscribing to the beliefs, not actively involved. So I heard him say that at the time, but he's not implying she's involved. It was just, on the podium with Giuliani, where Giuliani's talking about stats and numbers and what they can prove in terms of they've got their own theories. But then when Sidney Powell came out and started talking about things which, Tucker Carlson had a decent point. Probably the biggest crime in the history of humankind on the scale that it was being perpetrated. And if you don't have the most extraordinary evidence to back up those extraordinary claims, it's not the laundry list thing that Scott Adams was talking about. It's more like throwing poo-poo against the wall and hoping something sticks. And it's something I said for a little while. When you have strong arguments and you have bad arguments, not bad, when you have strong arguments and weak arguments, or arguments that are easy to prove or easier to prove, and arguments that, even if true, you will never be able to prove, you're better off just dropping the weak arguments, difficult to prove arguments, because you undermine the validity, the legitimacy, and your credibility as relates to the strong ones.
Exactly. And you could see it like earlier in the week. And Tucker did everybody a favor, and I'll give him credit. He was willing to take a lot of heat because there's a development, there's a Russiagate of the right, of people who want to repeat Russiagate, just do it on the right, throw in some allegations which have little kernels of truth, but which in the broad scope are wrong. And some of them are just provably false. I mean, she was saying things that were easily provably false, things that she clearly had not studied elections. She had never been involved in election law in her life, which was a huge problem, and didn't even know how elections were being done. So she was saying things about Dominion and Smartmatic and others were in jurisdictions where they were not even present. She was saying things like Smartmatic is only in LA County. And I know the whole history of this because I've been tracking this and involved with, I don't like computers involved in elections, period. Have been opposed to it for forever. I believe everything should be a paper ballot. And if we use technology at all, it should be as a backup, and it should use blockchain technology that's more secure and protects privacy and allows us to independently verify and audit the vote. but that should be a backup, not the sole and exclusive means. So for anybody out there, I'm not on the Dominion path or anything else, but Dominion and Smartmatic hate each other. The fact that there's overlaps 10 years ago when one bought a subsidiary of the other, that she was making a mountain out of a molehill. She was listening to Venezuelan ex-generals who won a coup in Venezuela, deep state hacks. It was a classic disinformation campaign, classic. And they were constantly making basic mistakes, putting in affidavits in Lynn Wood's case where Lynn Wood had this person put in precincts from the wrong state. He said it was from Michigan. They were from Minnesota. So he got all of his facts wrong. This is if you want to take apart a good, it's the old Sun Tzu principle: to defeat what is strong, attack what is weak. And going to what you're talking about, if you want to emphasize what is strong, you drop what is weak. This idea, and I understand where Scott Adams is saying, laundry lists are very persuasive to the court of public opinion, particularly when you want to believe something. So but I can tell you as a trial lawyer, it is a trap and you are dead to rights the moment you go in front of a jury or a judge and you start saying, well, if it's not this, it's the other thing. And if it's not the other thing, it's that third thing over here. And in case that doesn't work, I got 3 more I can throw at you. That doesn't work, folks.
Which incidentally we'll get to this judgment in a little later, but it's effectively what the judge in Pennsylvania did. He's like, you're throwing a number of arguments at me. It makes it easy for me to just discredit you at large without having to address even the strongest arguments, which would have been more difficult to address had they been the only arguments.
And notice what argument he totally skipped. Because of some things I was up to, they did ultimately include in the amended complaint, there was a second amended complaint, but they ended up including arguments about signatures in particular. You notice the judge avoided that issue almost entirely. So and he can get away with doing that because they have this sideshow. And so the sideshow was going to be intensely self-destructive. And the laundry list is only good if you're just going to argue in the court of public opinion. And that was not really Trump's objective. Trump, one wants to know what happened. 2, did he win an honest vote? He believes he did, and he has good cause for that. And 3rd, that if he can't get legal or political remedy, to at least establish the legacy that he fought for his base, and to establish him to run in 4 years from now, that this last one was stolen, and that has political utility. But he doesn't want to go down the Russiagate rabbit trail. And the only reason that temporarily happened at all is because Sidney convinced everybody that she had super secret evidence that would prove it. And I kept telling people, nope, I know where this came from. I know what its origins are. I know what its connections are. I know enough about election law and how elections work, that this is nonsense and will be easily disproven. Large aspects of it easily disproven. And she was doing that, the meme where the person has like 35 strings drawn to different things and he's pointing at all of them and how this connects, that kind of.
Yeah, well, it's the conspiracy meme. It's the guy.
Yeah, I think it is a conspiracy meme. There are things that are connections that are consequential and things that are connected that are distractions. And you have to be able to separate out the two. Because I represent a lot of anti-establishment people, I get pitched this stuff all the time. And half the time it's sincere and serious, where they're just misguided, misinformation. Sometimes it's deliberate disinformation. And the reason why I have the Snowden Files book behind me on the right and Bloods Are Over by James Ellroy, which is the last of the American Tabloid trilogy. American Tabloid is the first one. Cold 6000 is the second one. Bloods Are Over is the culmination of it. Goes into Hoover's files and some other interesting components. Is they both give the templates for disinformation campaigns. Ellroy is talking about all the COINTELPRO activities and how disinformation works, why it appeals to people. By the way, this goes to our confession by projection theory. Go and read a lot of the articles that the intelligence agencies and big establishment media were writing about Russiagate. And they're saying how disinformation works and how it operates. And just change it wherever there's Russia or something else, Trump, change it to them. And they're telling you what they are doing. And they're telling you how it works. And they're telling you why it works. And QAnon was one big, massive disinformation campaign, has been for 3 years, lying to people all the way through to get them to use their resources to crowdsource the truth and crowdsource activism and to be aware and alert. I mean, ask yourself why so many people weren't alert. Even for the first 2 weeks after the election, there were large numbers of people saying to me, don't worry, This is all part of Trump's trap of ensnaring everybody. And we don't need to get proactive about this. It's all part of the plan.
I mean, I'll go back to chess. You don't sacrifice your queen for a very long distance play. So it has to be pretty, next step in order for the sacrifice to make sense. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. Now, Josh had asked, oh, son of a gun. There was one super chat which I wanted to get to in terms of a substantive, relevant question right here. It was, what would Sidney Powell need to make proof of the claims? I mean, here's some basic things. Know where software is operating and where it's not. That'd be a good step, number one. Number two, know how voting machines work. Know where they're active, know where they're not. Number three, know where the statistical anomalies exist and where they don't exist. For example, Trump did not win California. Don't go around telling people he did. There's no one who seriously thinks that. Yet that's what she did. They don't say that they swung 6 points everywhere. That actually undermines one of the big statistical anomalies is this mysterious magical ballots that only mark ballots for Biden and no one else, up to upwards of 100,000 in multiple states, which the Democrats themselves have previously said an election contest is sufficient for a challenge. She was getting basic facts wrong. Smartmatic and Dominion are competitors. I get that Smartmatic bought Sequoia software, and 10 years ago, Dominion ended up buying aspects of that software from them, and thus there's an IP relationship, and there was an alleged non-compete back in 2009 and 2010 that got litigated in Delaware. They are core adversaries. In fact, usually your negative stories you read about either one of them comes from the other. So that's who they are. The idea that they were secretly rigging elections around the world, these were computer machine, it was not something you, number one, were likely to prove in a short time period. Number two, it was the kind of argument that was going to discredit you with almost all elected officials and judges very quickly. And three, it was an argument that just didn't have a lot of statistical evidence for it. You dug in and statistical evidence was the opposite way. And if you wanted to discredit, look at what happened. Initially, there was a lot of great statistical analysis of anomalies in the evidence. Some of it was a reach. Whether Benford's law fits elections is in controversy, but it's reasonable to at least try it and see how it looks. And then you can do the counter. Same with looking at statistical anomalies from the Edison database the New York Times put out in when votes were being reported. But there was also really good statistical analysis being done by Matt Brainerd and others, followed up with step substantiating evidence by Richard Barris of People's Pundit, going to by other people looking at what happened in parts of Pennsylvania, what happened in parts of Michigan, what happened in parts of Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, showing statistical anomalous outcomes that did not seem to make sense. All of that started to get crushed because all of a sudden then you saw this flood of Dominion type data that was not well substantiated, that people could take apart quickly and easily if you knew what you were doing. So what does that have the effect of? All of a sudden, nobody knows what statistical evidence to believe. All of a sudden, nobody knows what anomalies to credit. Well, I say, I brought up a few chats where people are asking why Trump is tweeting about Dominion. There's smoke when you have these foreign companies making voting machines that have no paper trail, no physical trail. But when it comes to what evidence you would need, in order to prove within a 1 month period or a 3 week period that was the determinant factor that flipped the election, what you would need was whistleblower affidavits, not from people from 2 years ago, from wherever, actual people insider with the code for what they did, how it worked, and sworn statements, video evidence, backup hard drives, USB drives with the information. And I got to tell you, because I start getting the messages when she comes out on air and she says, we're going to release the whatever. I say, this had better be what is coming out in the release, because if it's just going to be, it's a Canadian company. They have an office that they share with Soros in downtown Toronto, or a Soros company. All of that can have pretty, you may not like the explanations, but they have pretty, obvious explanations. These activist groups are going to be in certain types of buildings. You might want to have a certain type of company. There's a number of explanations which are not ever going to be sufficient to convince either the public or a jury that there was this international scheme to flip the votes, even if it's true. And so you've been pushing it from the beginning, and I'm not trying to stroke your ego. It's just you've been pushing it from the beginning. The issues that would be convincing and determinate, especially given the margins, verifying signatures. What else? I mean, excluding.
That's the big one. I mean, my view was added anecdotal evidence of double voting, felons voting, criminally insane voting, weird homeless registration campaigns, evidence of potential ballot harvesting. I mean, they even in the New York Times, called it granny troll. Going out and getting a bunch of grannies at nursing homes who didn't really vote that way, but you just get her collect their ballots. Same in apartment buildings, same at public housing projects. All of the risks attendant to various forms of mail-in balloting, but the easiest one to spot the fraud in it has always been matching the signatures.
I agree. We need to do something, and I like that idea. That the voting should not be hooked up to any computer just to eliminate anything like that.
That's how I measure a disinformation campaign. Look at its effect on the court of public opinion, effect on people's perceptions, effect on the value of evidence.
We had the discussion, but it certainly lent for immediate, predictable responses by anyone wanting to discredit Trump's side, even if he has better legitimate arguments. They get to bypass and ignore all of them by now focusing on these theories, which would require extraordinary proof to be proven. And so we saw it in real time. Nobody addressed certain hard facts that Giuliani was talking about. They made fun of him and his sweating hair, which really irritates me that people stoop to that level. And then they just went off on Sidney Powell and bringing in Venezuela and leaders in Canada. And so I guess the question is now, will it have an impact on the stronger, sort of more easy to prove aspect of the file going forward? Public opinion is what it is. Most people will probably not have changed their opinion either way. Going to the courts, what's it going to change in terms of strategy?
It goes from it's still a Hail Mary at this point, as Dershowitz identified, but it's the way I put it to someone today is it's a Hail Mary with Doug Flutie throwing it against Miami. So it's an above average Hail Mary. Whereas before it was not going anywhere, and it was going to do damage to Trump's legacy too. So the hardcore base would have stuck with him and believed it, every aspect of it, but it would have damaged him over time because it would have associated. Trump is smart. He doesn't want to go down like Gore. He wants a meaningful challenge, a meaningful contest. He'd like a legitimate election. But if he can't get that, at least establish that he tried and got the facts for it. He doesn't want to be because he has an excellent chance to come back in 4 years. Frankly, he'd be a lot stronger. Now, I believe that a correct legal challenge could in fact prevail. It's a little bit of a longer shot now because of how Sidney derailed things for about a week, but it's by no means gone. I mean, that now they're on the clock on some places. Pennsylvania has to have 100 people, 100 voters, 5 of them verified affidavits, file their election contest tomorrow by the end of business Monday in Dauphin County, if they're going to get an election contest on file in Pennsylvania. Now in Wisconsin, they're going through the recount. In Michigan, there's no set timeline. Arizona is 5 days after certification. Georgia's 5 days after certification. On our locals board, the vivabarneslaw.locals.com, I'm putting up purely for purely for entertainment purposes, without any claim of copyright, what a draft electoral contest would look like. I've already done it in Georgia. I'm going to do it in the other states. Now, technically, it's not legal advice. I just happen to be giving stuff away for free that I think looks like an interesting example. And what you folks out there choose to do with it, God bless, that's up to you. But if people want to file election contests, there's certain timelines, deadlines. They have to file them by. But I think this is a great opportunity for ordinary people to realize they do have some remedy. They do have. And if you're one of those people out there that believes the Dominion stuff is responsible, I believe there's issues with Dominion, but it's different than the ones that Sidney Powell's pointing out, which I'll get to. But pursue it. If you believe it, you have evidence of it. You can file a verified affidavit, file it in court, and try to get at least some remedy. And maybe the court shuts you down. Maybe they all shut you down. But at least it's a way of, for one thing, that's permanent record. 100 years from now, someone like me who likes to read these old court files in small rural counties will look it up and see you fought it and see you contested it and see you challenged it. Again, I'm not telling you to do so. It's of your own free will to do as you see fit.
Just so everybody knows, I just posted 3 links. One of them is the referral code if anyone wants to go to Rumble and also create accounts there because it's a good place. Second one is our locals page. Third one is an Amazon affiliate link to Parasitic Mind by Gad Sad. That's my audiobook for the week. Now I just had a question actually, and someone had asked earlier. I think we discussed it, and I think I forgot. What is the difference between a recount, a canvass, and an audit?
So they're really totally different procedures. So a canvass is when you go into things like absentee ballot applications typically. And so that's where when the Georgia Secretary of State publicly committed to a recanvass and a recount and an audit at the same time, that should have happened, and then it didn't happen. And the only reason he was able to get away with it, frankly, is because Sidney created a circus for about 4 or 5 days that allowed him to dodge scrutiny on the fact that he lied to the entire state. He lied to me and he lied to some other people, but that's another story, or his people did. But now maybe the pressure will be back on. Now there's talk about doing an emergency election procedures in Georgia. Maybe the governor's now putting pressure on him to do the signature match check. Here's what they're all hiding down there. They have never meaningfully done signature checks in Georgia. They've rejected absentee ballots for multiple reasons. They claim it's been rare for them to reject them for signatures. I'm not still fully believing them, but let's presume that to be the case. I know that a meaningful signature match, and had people on the ground tell me this, that we're in a position to know in Georgia, that a meaningful signature check would knock off 10% or more ballots.
Trump may still have a chance. We need to go after the evidence that's easier to prove, that's provable evidence. We need to, according to Barnes, we need to stay away from the evidence that is not going to be provable or harder to prove. All right, back to it.
Where Republicans have a 7-state edge. There's a bunch of states where they're tied. And then it'll be up to them. And that's who the people voted this time around. So why not let the political branches that the Constitution delegated, if there's an issue about who won the election, the House picks. And the only question is there an issue? Not definitely Trump won, not definitely Biden won. Is there an issue? Clearly there is if we do and here's where I believe I'm right. And the reason why I debated Michael Tracy earlier in the week is I wanted to show people, if you talk to a person on the left, doesn't like Trump, total skeptic of all of the questions about the election, by the end of that conversation, even he had to recognize that what I was requesting was pretty reasonable, and that it made sense with transparency and openness and democracy to simply have an audit of the signature matches. And if the signature matches are as good as the Georgia Secretary of State claims they are, then why is he so scared to allow a simple audit or independently confirmed signature match? And every state is. Pennsylvania won't allow it. Michigan won't allow it. Wisconsin's trying to keep people from doing their part of it. It's not the same kind of signature match check in Wisconsin, but they're not even letting him do that properly. Arizona, they're not letting him do it. Nevada, they're not letting him do it. If there's no problem with the signatures, why are they so scared to allow us to see the signatures?
All right. I mean, it's the, hindsight is 20/20. And if the evidence could have been presented, or everyone is saying, evidence will be presented in court, we'll see what's presented in court. But it does seem that you simplify it to the most basic, easy to understand, easy to prove, easy to verify question, which can be determinate. And we knew it because I forget the numbers now, but what was it? In previous elections, something like 4 to 5% of mail-in ballots would get rejected on signature. And this time, despite having 10 times as many mail-in ballots, it was under a fraction of a percent.
Exactly. And the people who said absentee balloting leads to mass fraud was the Georgia Democratic Party in court filings in 2009, was Jimmy Carter in the 2005 Carter-Baker report, was leading election experts and the New York Times in 2012, was federal judges, including Supreme Court judges of both parties, circuit court judges of both parties, district court judges of both parties, leading scholars, and international monitors and election standards, and the United States Election Assistance Commission and the Election Integrity Project, both blue ribbon committees, both independent, both bipartisan or nonpartisan, all agreed that the proper protocols was to have maximum transparency, allow people to view the whole process, live stream it to the world, make sure everything about it is monitored, observed, and audited. And so a recanvass is you look at how the whole process is for opening ballots and putting ballots into a certain place. And that's the canvassing part of it. The counting part of it is just counting the ballots themselves. And then the audit part is making sure there weren't more votes than voters, for example. And so and that did not happen in Georgia either. It clearly didn't happen the first time around because you wouldn't have had 4 different counties report that they completely missed a bunch of ballots. How did that happen? They clearly didn't audit and check to see, do we have an unusual anomaly here? So it's clear that we have elections that have serious problems and flaws, and we need meaningful, open transparency to determine what happened in the election. Also to establish the precedent that this is how we handle it in the future. To know where we need reform, we need to know where is there a problem. And I'm all in favor of people attacking the machines. I'm just saying don't sink everything into a complicated conspiracy theory that has votes being transported by the internet and being counted in Germany, and there being secret seizures of servers, none of which I believe is true. And then that's not how they do the ballot counting. So it depends on the state and the county and whatnot, but that isn't the great risk because that was always a trap. Like as soon as I got down to Georgia, I knew there was not a problem with the machine counting because they were anxious and eager to give a hand recount as their choice of remedy. And a hand recount, folks, just looks at the physical ballot. So you couldn't have the computer changing ballots like Sidney Powell alleged happened in Georgia, and the hand recount come back and say, no, there was no difference between the machine and the hand recount. The only places they found a gap was where they had failed, human error had failed to put the card in for the machine to even calculate and computate in the first place. So that's why, and that's what I knew. But when they were slow playing and playing games and originally saying, yeah, we're going to give you an audit, we're going to deputize some of your people to make sure you go in and make sure these signatures match. And then the moment Sidney Powell does her circus, all of a sudden they're like, well, we don't think we need to do that anymore. It's like, well, why are you scared of it? The one thing, I'll give an example. Once part of the Lynn Wood case raised that issues, and maybe maybe some of the people involved got ideas about what to put in the suit. As soon as certain things were focused on the signature issue, suddenly Mark Elias, the lead Democratic lawyer, the lead Democratic fixer, the man who helped launder the Clinton campaign money to Fusion GPS under the guise it was legal fees.
Saw your tweet from today on that.
Yes. And by the way, earlier in the week, Mark Elias's fans launched a massive doxing campaign against me to have me referred to the state bar in as many jurisdictions as possible, simply for me pointing this out about Mark Elias. But as soon as Mark Elias saw the signature issue popping up in the Lynn Wood case, all of a sudden he rushed to make an appearance where he had not been rushing to make an appearance before. So, and this is what people also don't know. All spring and all summer, Democrats went around intimidating secretaries of state and election officials with threatened lawsuits to get them to not enforce the signature match rules at all. And so why do you think they were doing that, folks? Because they have such confidence in the signature matches. They've always known what the core vulnerability is. And the whole campaign for the last 10 days has been, how do we get the Trump campaign off of the signature match issue? Magically in steps a disinformation campaign, of which I don't think Sidney Powell was a proponent. I think she was a victim. But unless you're really disciplined and unless you know how to pay, here's a trap, like one of the points you're talking about. If somebody gives you something really specific factually that's easy to disprove, be very careful about that kind of allegation, because that kind of allegation tends to be a trap and tends to say, well, if that fact is false, your credibility is gone and all your other stories are false too.
Well, it just having factual mistakes is a problem. But Robert, let me interrupt you there. And if you could just look at this camera for 1 second without the drink. We are over 20,000 people watching live, Robert. I mean, I was getting nervous that I wasn't going to get the screenshot in time. It's amazing. And now I'm going to bring up some comments because there are people who are angry. You don't know what
sure there are. Just as they were angry at Tucker Carlson. For what he did. And we're here to give you what we believe to be true, even if it's not what you want to hear. Well, because there's plenty of echo chambers you can be fed the sugar. This is not going to be an all dessert diet.
And I'll tell you, if Robert's wrong, and if my initial insights are wrong, it's out there in the ether. We don't take it back and we don't delete the videos. Someone was saying that, earlier you were wrong on the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett. Sure. And I was saying wrong and right, but not really, because you were saying you were sort of hedging your bets. You said, I think it should be I forget her
Lagoa.
name. Lagoa. But if the establishment wants ACB, and the Federalist Society wants ACB, and lo and behold, so you might be hedging your bets. You might be making two, conflicting predictions so that you can fall back on the one that comes to be. That's an argument tactic. But it was not the case that you said never was ACB going to get appointed. You're saying, I like Lagoa, but I have a feeling. And so once, if Robert's wrong, he's wrong. But you'll see. The time is running out.
Like Tucker, I would be thrilled. I'm not afraid of conspiracy theories. So I've been willing to voice those, share those, articulate those, argue those in court, probably more so than 99.9% of lawyers. But what I know is not to get trapped by a disinformation campaign. And this was a classic disinformation campaign. Everybody started, instead of people crowdsourcing files about dead people voting, about people who moved voting, about unusual voting patterns in places where there was unusual mail-in ballot participation, unusual timing of when votes were delivered in certain places, all of a sudden their attention is shifted to searching Dominion's relationship to Smartmatic in 2006. Yeah, it worked. It got all of the resources distracted. It got them all off message. It allowed them to be easily mocked and satirized. I got to see it in live time. I got to see election officials go from a position of weakness and, we'll give you what you want because we'll look like idiots if we don't, fraudulent idiots if we don't, to, we don't got to do nothing now. You guys are just going to be laughing stocks in a week. So give Trump credit. Tucker took risk, knowing that the core audience was going to hate him for saying this. Imagine it's like somebody on the left who are coming out and saying, by the way, Russiagate is a big scam and Trump legitimately won. The left hated them. Anybody who did that. The left tried to Glenn Greenwald, ruthlessly attacked for the last 4 years, but he was willing to stick to his guns about what he believed was true. And in the end, he was right. That's what you want. You want reliable sources of information and intel, especially the ones that will tell you what you don't want to hear when you need to hear it. And again, could be wrong, absolutely. But I have no motivation to be wrong here. I mean, my view is there's a real chance at real election reform. There's still a chance we find out what really happened in this election. And that means it may be that Trump actually won it or that it should go to the House to determine it and let the people's elected representatives make the choice according to state delegation as the Constitution provides. Or maybe that doesn't end up being the case. But either way, from a PR perspective, Sidney Powell was a disaster on this. And she did probably long-term damage to her. Not so much that I think Trump saved her, frankly, by letting her out of having to present the proof in court, which was not going to be there. Now she can just say she always had it, never had the chance to present it.
Well, thanks a lot for watching. I'm going to keep bringing videos that about stuff that don't get reported on the news or may not have been reported yet. And you have a good night. God bless you.